Welcome to my humble little office. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I'm a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. The journey continues today on July 22nd, 2021 at approximately 8:59 p.m. PST. Well, today's been interesting. Way too many things on the go to really recount. But what I do know is I just got a picture in just probably 10 minutes ago on one of the races I've been dealing with in Races of the Worlds. A couple of minor modifications that'll have to get done to it, but that's okay. It's working out quite nicely from that side. Again, it really boils down to this. If you've got a goal, doesn't matter what the dream, don't give up on it. Now, I started my journey where it comes to writing really was awakened when I was in grade 10. Here I am, 48 years later, finally making things happen. Okay, it's because I made some miscalculations, I've had to adjust certain things, but that's okay. The reality of it is, I set them in motion. Since I know I made a couple of mistakes, I've had to cut really far back and make some extra sacrifices to ensure that I actually have the finances to finish off the journey that I've started. But on the plus side, that means I've already got the money aside to deal with the rest of the payment for what I've got going. I mean, all in all, it boils down to this. You get a goal in mind, you get an idea of what you're aiming for, and then you set about making it happen. And the nice part is that once you have that done, once you've got a goal in place, once you've got a purpose and a plan to make it happen, then you've got to have the persistence to stay on said plan and the patience to realize that it's going to take time to bring it all into balance. If you're building a house, it's well known it's going to take a lot of time to do it. Now, for some reason, where it comes to construction, a lot of the time I'm seeing it take months to put a building up. However, one building stood out beyond all others. When I was probably about 30 years ago, so well, yeah, I was still living over there, so I'd be in my late teens, early 20s. And I watched a building go up. And quite seriously, it was the Jehovah's Witnesses that put a church up. And I watched them to get together. They put the building up at 7 minutes to a wall. Now, if you can yes, they had a phenomenal team of carpenters. Okay, it wasn't just two carpenters. They had an entire entourage. But it does go to show that if you've got enough people, you can put a building up a lot faster than this idea of taking months and months and months of doing it. Okay, at 7 minutes to a wall. Okay, it took them the normal amount of time to drop the concrete floor in. Okay, because it's going to take that much time to cure anyway. Anyway, you want to look at it. But it did prove if you've got the right organization, the right organizational abilities and the right people helping you, you can make a building come up awfully quick. Okay, you don't need to take months upon months to put a building together. Okay, you really don't. And my personal take on it was real simple. You've got the job in mind, get the things moving in the right order, and get it done and dealt with so you can move on to other things. Okay, same thing where it comes to writing, same thing when it comes to, I listen to Gene Simmons from the old rock group Chris, and I just happened to be scanning through the channels one day. There was a show he had on called Simmons Family Jewels, right? Or Gene Simmons Family Jewels, and it was neat because I turned it to that show, and I was just flipping through the channels at the time, and all of a sudden he leans into the camera and he goes, "Look, for all of you people that have a creative streak, there is a misunderstanding. Most people seem to think that inspiration comes, that success, creative success is 90% inspiration and 10% perspiration. And he says, but I'm here to tell you, I've spent my life being creative. He says, and it is actually completely the other way around. It's 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. He goes, when I go to create a song, I go into my office. And he says, I go in going, I'm going to come out with what I consider a good song by the end of the day. He says, I'll sit in my studio for 8, 10, or 12 hours at a stretch just working on that song. Right? He says, the fact it turns out as a good song afterwards is great. But he says, I won't walk out until I've got that song done. Okay, I have a similar problem where it comes to writing. I'll get a thought in my head and I'll start running with it, and I could get lost for 6, 8 hours without even thinking. Okay, but the reality is this: you take the thought that you've got, you take that creative side of you, and you go, what am I going to do? What is not working for me? What is working for me? Okay, I make notes all over the place, and unfortunately I'm bad for it. I'll write notes down and forget to write the date or the purpose of them. So quite often I have all these little bits and pieces of notes. I'm going like, gee, I was supposed to do this. Now, where was that supposed to fit? Which is where I've got the problem right now where it comes to the Yldrbacian Chronicles. I've got all kinds of little thought lines and thought processes that some of them are dealt with, some of them are not. And I'm going to have to go through them and figure out which ones I've done, put them all together, and then start clearing them out. Because I've got a lot of material, and I just haven't dealt with it. Okay. Now, again, it boils down to, if you let your, I've got a whole pile of things, and unfortunately, this side of my desk all got cluttered up again, which is really annoying to me. But I did it to myself, so who am I going to blame but me? That's just the reality of it. So, when you've got an idea in your head, okay, first and foremost, get the plan, get your work area workable. Okay, if you don't have it workable, you're going to run into troubles. Okay, but the more smoothly the energy around you runs, the easier it's going to be for you to function. Okay, now, the reality is I've built myself for years as a spiritual guide. And the reason I build myself that way is because I don't make decisions for people. People drop me a question, I go, here's the way that I see it working. These are tools that if they apply to me, I put them to use. If they don't apply to me, such as when I have helped people quit smoking, I never started, I'm not going to start to find out just to test out my own theory. Okay, I'll just take the word of the other people I've helped and go, okay, it worked for them, it's worked for a lot of other people, I don't have to try it. Okay, they say you cannot assess somebody's life if you haven't walked a mile in their shoes. Well, I'm telling you, there are times when walking a mile in somebody else's shoes is not practical. That was how I got into heavy drugs and alcohol, was by walking in somebody else's shoes. Okay, to figure out how their mind was working. Well, I figured it out, and I was fortunate. I walked out of it essentially unharmed. Okay, at this point in life, now what I have to do is look at the reality and go, where am I going from here? Now, the mistake I made earlier this year, I've done rough calculations. I figure it's going to take me 6 months to get back on track. But at least I know where I'm standing. So I'm not trying to figure it out at this point. I'm just simply going with it. Okay. Now, that said, if you're following somebody that's claiming to be a spiritual guide, very important that you remember one little detail. If they're telling you in order for you to find happiness, you must fear whatever entity you're giving credit for creating everything. If they're telling you fear that entity, you're not walking into a world of happiness because you're basing it on fear. Okay, if you base, and karmic law says energy out, energy in. So if you're putting out fear as a basis for your life growing, what you're going to draw back to you is people that are afraid of you, that only respond to you or primarily respond to you because they're afraid of the outcome if they don't. Now, in all fairness, I've made that mistake before myself, where it worked out, but, and this is a bad example, I guess, in a way, but I ended up helping a young gentleman get through school. But after the young gentleman graduated, he literally came to me and told me that the only reason he actually went was because he was afraid of my reaction if he didn't. Okay, now I'm not known for being subtle. Like I had a group of kids come to me one day. They brought a friend of theirs with them. They figured she had a really good brain, but she was pulling D's and E's, and even a few I's in her class. And they brought her to me because they were hoping I could talk her into turning her life around, to get back to school. Well, I did something that was completely backwards. They brought her to me, and I looked at her and I says, I understand you're not happy with school. And she goes, well, no, it's pointless. I says, well, I gotta thank you. Well, the people that brought her looked at me, and it's like their mouth hit the floor, and it's like, what do you mean, thank her? And I told the kid, I says, look, I have never met somebody so self-sacrificing as you, and I gotta thank you on behalf of everybody. And she goes, what do you mean? I says, well, think about it. You don't want to go to school, so you're skipping out. And she goes, yeah, so how is that helping? I says, well, there are teachers that don't want to work. They want to get their paycheck. Your problem child, you're skipping out. They've got one less student to teach. The teachers that desire to teach, you've skipped out, so therefore you're not there, causing a distraction. So the teacher is able to focus on the kids that desire to learn. Then you've got the students that desire to learn, and you're outside the class, you've skipped out, so they don't have to compete with that distraction. Then you've got the kids that don't desire to learn. They're taking your lead and they're following you out the door. Net result, you're helping all of them. I said, but the really ironic part of it is that you're making this incredible self-sacrifice, which absolutely give you a major pat on the back. But you're skipping out and you're helping all these kids, and the ironic part is you're going to end up working for one of these kids because they'll have the education to get the higher job, the higher paying job. They'll have the marks to be picked up by the big companies, and they'll be the ones telling you what to do. So thank you so much for that. Well, as it turned out, the kid that all her friends were worried about was back in school the following day, and with a month was pulling straight A's and B's. Okay, now to me that was a win. It was a completely backwards way of dealing with it, but it worked. Okay, and this is why I tell people I won't lie to you to make you feel better. Okay, unless you directly ask me to. But the nice part about it is every tool I use is one that every tool I offer you, if it applies to me, I am using it. Okay, and that's just the way it is. Don't take my word for it. Test these tools out on your own. If you haven't tried them before, if you haven't experienced them and you're still having troubles, give them a shot. Okay, I'm starting to get more and more questions being handed to me of major issues. Okay, and one of the biggest issues that I got asked Okay, and I probably won't have time to finish this today, but I'm going to touch on it anyway. And that was an interesting question. Okay, I was asked, why should I not fear death? Do heaven and hell actually exist? Well, this is going to throw you for a bit of a loop. The reason not to fear death is very simple. There is not anybody I'm aware of that will get out of this life alive. You're going to die. The question is not, are you going to die? It's, how are you going to live? Now, having been dead multiple times myself, as in flatlined, as in been to the other side, clinically had to have my heart restarted, I did find out something very important. Heaven, as in the clouds, the angels, the fluffy white place to sit, the relaxing music, the white walls, and the whole 9 yards, does exist. Okay, and it is a great place to relax. The place with the fire, the brimstone, the torture, the river Styx, all of this, all the horrible torture, all the pain and suffering for the dead does exist. The place where, for those of you that believe that once you're dead, you're in a coffin or in a plot in the ground, and that's where you stay until your body completely decays, but that's the end of your life cycle. That place does exist. Okay, but here's the kicker. You're not trapped in any one of them. Okay, I remember a situation where I happened to connect with the individual. Now understand, I've been a working medium since I was born. Okay, I died the day I was born, and I've been able to see the dead since. But this one day in particular, I watched this guy. A woman came to me, and she wanted to find her husband had just recently passed. Well, had passed a few years back, actually. And he had said, he was a firm believer in the afterlife, as was she. And he had said if there's any way to get a hold of her, that he would do it. Well, it'd been 4 years, and she'd never heard from him. Right. So she come to me, and once I identified what her husband looked like and how he had passed away and that sort of thing, all of a sudden I get this incredible image, and I'm relaying it to her. Right. Like he believed in the afterlife, absolutely, but he believed that it was literally a case of, yeah, some people go on, but when you get in, once you die, you're put in a coffin, and that's where you stay until your body decays. So he gets over onto the other side, comes out of the mist into this crowd of people, and he did meet a few of his loved ones, including, if I recall correctly, a little red setter. Well, in all fairness, red setter isn't that little. But he met them right there. And then, of course, he turned and asked a couple of people. It's like, because he's essentially on a train station, like on a train station landing. He's looking at all these people and people coming out of the mist. And he looked at one of the passers-by and he goes, I thought I was supposed to be in a coffin. Well, the person looks at him and goes, well, yeah, it's down the hall on the left. Just go grab one. There's lines of them. So he trundled down the hall, and sure enough, he looked in. There was a room full of coffins as far as the eye could see. So he goes into the coffins, in amongst the rows, and he's looking at these bodies laying there. And of course, the neat part was they're all laying there with their hands like this, and they're laying in the coffin. And so he looks at them and he goes, okay. Climbs into the coffin, lays down and crosses his arms like this. And he's sitting there for, 5 minutes. And all of a sudden he pops his eyes open, he sits up and he goes, wait a minute, I climbed into that coffin. And he walks down and back out of the room and down the hallway into the main station. And right then he connects with his wife. Well, with his widowed wife, right? He connects with her, and we talked for a minute, and we made sure that she finally had the connection, that she knew what was going on. And of course, she ended up in tears, which is understandable. That's actually a good thing. But we got done with that and we disconnected. And I looked at her and I says, okay, here's the problem. Because she says, well, why did he take 4 years to get in touch with me? I says, well, because realistically, if you think in terms of a day is as 1,000 years, a second works out to about 4.5 days, a minute works out to about 9 months. Well, 5 minutes times 9 months works out to, 5 times 9 works out to just shy of 4 years. Okay. So, the net result was he woke up, right? Basically, what he done was got there, went down the hall, laid down for 5 minutes, stood back up, and meanwhile, that 5 minutes translated into 4 years on our end. So he made connection as quick as he could. Okay, that would be the issue of the coffins. Now, where it comes to heaven, to that nice little white fluffy place, yes, it's there. The harps, beautiful music. Sometimes they'll play bagpipes. Personally, I love the sound of bagpipes. Okay, mind you, finding somebody that can play them well is really tricky. And I'll tell you, if you ever learn to listen to somebody trying to play bagpipes when they don't know how, it almost sounds like somebody strangling a cat. Okay, and yes, I have heard that kind of noise before. Kind of like hearing a bunny bark. It does happen, but you do get that music, that peaceful relaxation, but here's the funny thing. You're not trapped there. You stay there as long as you feel fine. As long as you feel is necessary. Then you come down and you can intermix with the other types of people. Because the whole thing over there is that place that many people would call purgatory, the halfway point, is where connections are made, where plans are made for your next lifetime. Now, your life is not preordained when you get here. Okay, what happens is you lay out a certain number of things that you desire to gain physical wisdom around. The obvious one is if you're planning on coming into this world to gain wisdom around cancer, okay, your experience, the connections you set up, the choices you make when you get here will determine whether or not you develop cancer or whether you end up working with people that have developed cancer. Either one will provide you the wisdom around cancer. But it's not preordained as in, on the 31st of May of 2098, you will end up getting cancer. Okay, that's not the way it works. Freedom of choice gives you all kinds of options, and those choices are what end up manifesting the life that you end up co-creating. Now, the reason you don't fear death, or that I don't fear death, I mean, in my case, it's kind of redundant. Okay, 4 times before I was dead, 4 times since at least. The 4 before I was dead, I literally had to have my heart restarted by a medical professional. The 4 times after, I managed to do it myself, or with help from somebody that was not a registered medical professional. One of them, in all fairness, was my father, who was search and rescue for 13 years. Okay, but death itself is just a transitional point. It's like when your vehicle breaks down. Your vehicle breaks down, you end up leaving it by the side of the road, getting up and walking off until you find a new vehicle. And when you do that, you pick a new vehicle, but you still remember everything you learned before. The problem with a corporeal body is the brain capacity is not such as to handle for most people. The brain capacity of the corporeal body is not enough to handle all the past life memories. So it sort of holds them as footnotes, a feeling that I've seen this before, an image, a quick flash of me, maybe, like in my case, at one point I was a great artist. This lifetime, it's really bad. I can draw a stick man that fell down the staircase, landed in the carburetor. But as far as artwork goes that I consider artwork, not a really good pull. Okay, with this in mind, all of these things you may have, okay, but in the new corporeal body, you're only likely to get footnotes to say this is here, or an image that's something I'd like to do. That's an interest. I don't know where it came from. I've heard many times when a child develops an interest that the parents have no connection to. But where that comes from is past life. And these are some of the things that you carry with you in your negotiation path through purgatory. But you're not held in any one of the sections that I've laid out, or any of the other ones. Okay, yes, there are in hell, there is the fiery lake, there is the torture, there is the demons and what have you, they're all there. The problem is, you're not, once you figure out why you've why you've let yourself go there, once you understand that, that's when you can start to evolve. So eternity is not quite what you're led to believe. Okay, eternity does not mean for all time. It just means until you recognize why you're punishing yourself, or why you're holding yourself back from experiencing. Now understand, in the corporeal world, in this world, I am not talking about going out and doing all sorts of evil, nasty things and hurting other people. Quite the contrary. But negative things do happen, and if it weren't for negative things happening, we wouldn't know what the positive things were. Okay? However, karmic law is simple. Energy out, energy in. Which literally means when you're putting effort into something, or when you're focusing on something, if you're focusing on the negative, you'll draw the negative to you. If you focus on the positive, you draw the positive to you. The funny part is, it doesn't necessarily guarantee one or the other, but it does stack the deck in your favor. Okay, now with that in mind, I strongly encourage you to really focus on the positive. Minimize the negative things. Focus on the positive. Maximize the most you can get out of them. Now, I keep these videos to a half hour mark. The reason for it is I return to bring this message to the world. That message being, working together, we can make this a better world for just about everybody. No war, no famine, no greed, no jealousy. It can be done, but it's going to require your assistance. So how about if we get a thumbs up for the video, and remember to subscribe to the channel. Okay, and don't forget to ring the alert bell to let you know when the next video comes out. I will be back again tomorrow. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other, and for pity's sakes, stay positive.